Hi, I'm Virgil Christ the Doubtful, and this is the summary chapter for 2nd Nephi. If you listen to my summary chapter for 1st Nephi, you may remember that 1st Nephi was about half plot, that is, the family of Lehi moving around the desert on their way to the New World, and half of it was more or less visions and interpretations and prophecies. 2nd Nephi muddles that up a bit. There's very little plot, and a whole lot of prophecy and vision, and a whole lot of plagiarizing Isaiah. Now, as I review it, I'm going to do each chapter, and I'm going to put it into a category so you get an idea of how much of this book is worth reading. Because honestly, you could read the first few chapters of this book, skip right to the end of the book, and still get the general idea. So here in order are the chapters of 2nd Nephi. The first chapter, 2nd Nephi, begins where the first book of Nephi ends off. The family has reached the New World and is trying to get situated in their new towns, villages, cities. We don't really know. We don't know how many there are. We don't know really what they're up to. It just has Lehi giving a summary of how we got here, how amazing the New World is, and how bleak their future is, because one of the things that has become a constant theme is how futile all of this effort is. We know the children are going to rebel against each other. There's no way to fix that problem, and in the end, it won't get fixed until Jesus arrives in 500 years. Things will go back to being awful for about 1800 years, and then things will get better again. There's no way to fix any of this, no way to speed it along, and then no way to improve our lot in life. In the second chapter of Nephi, Lehi is now on his deathbed and giving blessings to his children in the form of repeating all the same warnings and prophecies we've already heard. He does this to each of his kids and their grandkids, and then he does it to other people's kids. Zoram's kids show up and get blessed. He then expands on the idea of Adam and Eve and how original sin works in Mormonism, and how the only way humanity could ever hope to reach heaven is to recover from the fall. I mean, this part's actually interesting to me. It's theological. It's got some meat to it, but things will go downhill swiftly. So in third chapter of 2nd Nephi, Lehi is still on his deathbed. He prophesizes about Jesus and Joseph Smith. So this becomes a whole theme. Joseph Smith, who's going to write the Book of Mormon, is the great-great-something's grandson of the original Joseph of the Bible. And the prophecy includes the fact that the Joseph in the future who will make things better will be the son of a Joseph himself, hence Joseph Smith Jr. So, and this is how amazingly prophetic the Book of Mormon becomes when it comes to itself. And this is another theme of the book, that the Book of Mormon predicts itself over and over again, and how great that it will be. The fourth chapter of 2nd Nephi has Lehi continue his very, very long and very slow deathbed blessing. He warns people, he prophesizes, and he has all of his grandchildren and children around, and then he dies. And Nephi doesn't waste any time giving Laman and Lemuel crap, and the sons of Ishmael too. But he starts giving them a hard time about all the stuff his father just said. So, poor Lehi's not even cold in the ground, and Laman and Lemuel are getting an earful from Nephi about how their children are going to ruin everything and how God hates them. They are just bad news all around. And not surprisingly, in the 5th chapter, God has to come and warn Nephi to leave. Amazingly, the sons of Ishmael and his brothers are not happy with chastisements of them. So we also find out, amazingly here, that Nephi has sisters. He has sisters. We don't know where they came from. They've never been mentioned before. And as far as I know, they'll never be mentioned again. But they're in there, his sisters. So Nephi, his magic sisters, Sam, Zoram, and all of their kids head off into the wilderness. So they go from Jerusalem to the wilderness, to the ocean, to the New World wilderness, and they leave that wilderness to go to some other wilderness because they're going to be murdered. They settle into a new place that they call Nephi, and Nephi becomes their sort of king, although he refuses to be called king. And they call themselves, of course, the Nephites, because why wouldn't they? Immediately, too. I mean, this is like the day they show up. Like, he's like, this is the town of Nephi, and you're all the Nephites. And they build a town. It's amazing. And it's unbelievable, literally unbelievable, because Nephi teaches his brothers and their kids how to do all of this very complicated stuff, like work metals and build buildings, and they build a new temple, a la the Temple of Solomon. I don't know how Nephi learned all of this in Jerusalem, because he was a kid when they left. But apparently he picked up on a lot of very important trade for starting a new civilization. And here we are in a new civilization, and he's just banging it out. Meanwhile, in the most important verse in the entire book, 2 Nephi 5, Laman, Lemuel, all of their kids and everyone who stays with them turns black. They are cursed by God with a skin of blackness, and they are described specifically as awful, miserable, treacherous, mischievous, loathsome people, and that mixing the families of Nephi and Laman and Lemuel is absolutely forbidden, that they will be cursed if they do. So if you want to read the racism in the Book of Mormon, and you're not sure where to start, I mean, there was some of this in 1 Nephi, but as 2 Nephi 5 is where you just get the bulk of it. It is absolutely atrocious. Moving forward, in 2 Nephi 6, Nephi's brother Jacob starts to preach to the assembled white Nephites, and he tells them that Jerusalem has fallen, and then he starts to plagiarize Isaiah. Just a taste. It isn't until the next two chapters, 2 Nephi 7 and 8, where he basically just lifts out of Isaiah 50 and 51, talking about how God will eventually destroy the world. And this begins a love affair with Isaiah. The 9th chapter describes how to get to heaven, which is important. He then gives us a very clear understanding of what heaven is going to be like. We get our bodies back. It's a reunion of our bodies with our souls, and then we're judged and then sent physically to either heaven or hell. Then in the end of the 9th chapter of 2 Nephi, Jacob actually strips off his clothes and shakes them at the people to tell them how serious he is. Just to, this is how serious I am, people. Shaking my clothes at you. I hope it worked. In the 10th chapter, we get a prophecy about America. It is specifically about the United States of America. How great it will be, how God will defend it, how it will put off attackers and never have a king. It's again futile and pointless to care about any part of history between 500 BC and the life of Jesus, and then again between the life of Jesus and America, because it's all going to be going wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. 2 Nephi 11 through 2 Nephi 24 is 13 solid chapters of Isaiah, and this brings us up to 15 total chapters of Isaiah that we've just dragged into the Book of Mormon. Remember, of course, that we have golden plates that we're carving into. All of this has to be carved in, and they already have Isaiah on another set of plates. So what's happening is he's transcribing Isaiah from the brass plates to the other set of plates and editorializing them. He's putting all this Book of Mormon stuff into them. The whole point of all of this, by the way, appears to be the idea that God regularly punishes the iniquities of Jerusalem by letting other countries destroy them and take them off. So these repeated exiles, which historically is somewhat accurate. So Nephi, by which I mean Joseph Smith, is trying to link this idea to the story being told about Lehi and his family, where their exile from Jerusalem is in fact another version of this. And 2 Nephi even includes the idea that there are tons of other Jews out there, the islands of the sea, for example, where this has happened. And this is, of course, a core to that tree vision that we have already had described to us at the end of 1 Nephi. Moving all the way forward to the 25th chapter, we get a very, very, very specific prediction of Jesus, pretty much down to the day. It even says his name is going to be Jesus Christ, which of course is not his name. And it prophesizes that Joseph Smith very specifically is going to write the Book of Mormon. And this again goes back to the whole idea that all of history is fixed and unchangeable up to the Book of Mormon being written by Joseph Smith. It also has Satan reigning supreme and distorting the meaning of and message of Jesus. The 26th chapter says Jesus will come to America, and that both Jews and Gentiles must be convinced of the true meaning of the Book of Mormon and history of Israel and all that, or they'll go to hell. The 27th chapter predicts the Book of Mormon again, and it predicts that it will be written by a seer and prophet, and that 3 witnesses will see it before the plates are returned and buried. So this is a very, very specific prediction of Joseph Smith. It raises the odd vision of Joseph Smith reading this and dictating this prophecy about him dictating this prophecyception. And at the very end of this, since we haven't heard from Isaiah in 2 chapters, we get a little bit of Isaiah 29. So this is basically the 16th chapter of Isaiah that we've had. This 28th chapter of 2 Nephi predicts that even though the Book of Mormon is super awesome, Christians will hate it. Christians will hate it mostly because they will belong to the great and abominable church, the whore of the earth, which has been set up by Satan. So they are blind to the fact that the Book of Mormon is awesome, and they will fail to accept it, and they will go to hell. The 29th chapter says the Book of Mormon is also really awesome, even though it is, quote, yet another Bible, end quote. And it sets up this idea that God is constantly delivering Bibles to the people. There are lots of Bible bits that are sent down by God, and that we should accept them, although the Book of Mormon, shocker, is the last time he's going to do this. The 30th chapter says that everyone should really love the Book of Mormon, and if they do, they'll turn white. So that's great. And then we get about half of Isaiah 11 to tell us just how awesome this is going to be. The 31st chapter of Nephi begins Nephi's wonderful end of his prophesizing. It takes him 3 chapters, by the way, to end his prophesizing, but he lets us know he's wrapping it up in the 31st chapter. And all the stuff he's told you, by the way, is amazing, and he's very satisfied with it, and you should believe it. And everyone in 500 BC America should believe in Jesus, follow his examples, which he hasn't set, and get baptized like him, which he hasn't done yet, and listen to his words that he hasn't spoken, and believe in him, even though he hasn't manifested yet, although I assume he already exists. The 32nd chapter is just Nephi telling you how he's almost done. It is a short chapter, but he does take an entire chapter to tell you how he's almost done. And then in the 33rd and final chapter, Nephi actually finishes talking, and if you don't believe him, you should. And ask Jesus, because Jesus will tell you, and if you don't believe him, you're of the devil. So there you go. There is the second book of Nephi. I wouldn't recommend reading much of it. You can read the first 6 chapters, I think, and then jump to the end. There is some interesting stuff in there, but it is just absolutely buried in Isaiah and repetitive nonsense, stuff we've already heard, stuff we already know. Again, the futility of the Book of Mormon is becoming very grating. This insanely specific Book of Mormon predictions and prophecies is so telling and so transparent. It really is it's so much a book in its time and place of the 1820s. One perfect example is there's a moment where he talks about baptism and how important baptism is. And I believe, and I'd have to look this up, but I'm not going to, but I believe that this is because it was a question of the day. This is an issue that Joseph Smith felt strongly about, or thought he needed to clarify or have in there as an actual tenet of this religion. And so he made sure to stick it in there. It is not subtle. It is spelled out on a billboard. So that is the Book of Mormon's second Nephi, all 33 chapters of it. I'm moving on now to Jacob. Actually, this is the first time I've recorded anything in a while because I had to do all the editing and post work and cleanup for the actual chapters of this book. So I waited until the end to get to the summary. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned something. And I hope you don't join the great and abominable church. As always, I am your guide, Virgil.